All right. And I'll just go next. So Adriana Stagnero, project manager for Goldridge RCD. We have a couple announcements. Our North Bay Forest Improvement Program has another round of funding opening in September. So for those who would like to apply for funding for either a forest management plan to be written by a forester, or for your finished plan to be, some activities to be funded for implementation, you can apply through the North Bay Forest Improvement Program. Hopefully it's a good idea to get your application in kind of early, but the review period starts in September. So if you miss this round, we're gonna have another round in the spring, around April. So it's never too early to start working on that and put it in. And our review team and the technical staff is happy to work with you to get your application to the state it needs to be, if you need help with that.
So Adriana, can you say when that application period ends?
No, not, I think they take them through September. I'm actually not sure. Let me see. Jason Wells would be the better person for this. You might need to have it in by September 1st. Let me see. It's a good question. I should know. So this is open September 1st. And then, yeah, okay, so applications will be accepted again starting September 1st. I will find out if there's a deadline to that for you.
Thank you.
I would think maybe just the end of the month. What else is new? Oh, we're going to be having a new Grizzly Corps fellow starting next month. So Tess was the one we just previously had, and she attended a lot of our meetings here. Rose will be our new one, and Rose will be, I'm going to be supervising her, so she has a lot more time to work with me on forestry activities. So she's probably going to be doing a lot more for the forest working group than Tess was able to, because she had a full plate already. And yeah, you'll probably see her at other related forestry events too. So I look forward to introducing you guys to her next month. And yeah, maybe that's it for now. Yeah. And I guess from the forest working group, I'm thinking about advertising the North Bay Forest Improvement Program to the attendees of the conference in a communication soon, so that we can just get the word out to them, and other funding opportunities as they come up. So that's it for me. And I'll go on to Ron. Did you have anything to add? You're next on my screen. I know you and Jill kind of touched on Gualala business already, but
yeah, actually, the Sonoma RCD is meeting next Thursday.
oh, okay.
So I'll have a lot of information by then. But I met some people from Circuit Rider and for Conservation Works, and we've been trading offices, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, Christy and Tom. Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay, well, we'll hear more about it when they're up. All right. Thanks, Ron. Lynn.
We have just been, this is Lynn Garrick in the Upper Mark West watershed. We've just been, it seems, busy with the idea of where we want or can plan to put shaded fuel breaks in the watershed. So one of those is with the vegetation management grant that we got, that will complete a shaded fuel break on Calistoga Road. The other is a county program that's looking at where they might do what they call their hazardous fuel reduction program. So those are, some of them are roadside shaded fuel breaks. Some of them are linking roads together for better ingress and egress and firefighting purposes. A lot of outreach to landowners and trying to get the landowners along those lines engaged and agreeable. So that has been pretty much what we've been concentrating on. We did have our annual social last Saturday, and we had a whole contingent of CAL FIRE representatives from the state who came and gave us an award for being the 700th fire-wise community in the state of California. So that was a nice recognition, and a nice time to get together and play and party and have music without any work involved.
That sounds great. Thanks, Lynn. Oh, Dee, you're on mute.
So Lynn, is this project still inching into Napa County at all?
Actually, the county programs, of course, are just in Sonoma County. The one that we call Diamond Mountain to Mark West, the footprints of those, or the lines of those fire breaks and where we have the most landowner engagement are in Sonoma County. So they're not quite inching into Napa County, although we had an interesting meeting yesterday. Donnie Dwyer from the Diamond Mountain Fire Safe Council and myself, Ann Cottrell, who's the supervisor for Upper Napa Valley, for the county supervisor, and Susan Gorin, and Rebecca Hermosillo, who is a candidate for the first district supervisorial district. We met together yesterday to talk about the cross-county collaboration and how we might work together in the future. And so I think we're looking right now at least from the Dawnine and myself, at engaging the other fire safe councils that have ridge tops. So Mount Veeder, Mayacamas, Knights Valley, Franz Valley, our whole chain of ridge tops between Sonoma and Napa County, to see what we want to put together, what the common needs are, and how we can be more influential about doing work up in the ridge tops.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. That's great news.
Great. Okay. And Jason Mills, you're next.
That is exciting, Lynn. That Ridgetop Fire Safe Council connection, that's critical. And that old Mayakama Ridge, we can't let political boundaries. They're doing awesome work up on Mount Veeder, and Napa's really getting it done, so we can learn from each other. And I'm really excited about us working in tandem with CCNB to do the model roadside project made possible through the Ag and Open Space grant. So thank you, Kim, for funding all this great work. And I think it's going to be awesome, because we're going to really be working. My crew, represent WRA, which is a consulting outfit and also a contracting outfit that I manage. And my team, we do ecologically sound vegetation management work. And, that's my stake in all of this, is to see the work done well. And there's no shortage of needs out there. So it'll be cool working with CCNB and getting to kind of work along their supervisors and staff to really put the right level of training to the right site. And, we can get involved with doing the chemical applications and stuff to really make like a long lasting impression on roadside vegetation removal projects, which I wish was the case more often. We get a lot of mastication and routine maintenance, but it's all expensive. And then we're doing some really cool work on Saddle Mountain with Ag and Open Space District under Monica Del Martini. And it just so happens that many of the polygons we're treating there in this post-fire site to make a whole bunch of fuel reduction piles. I mean, these piles are in the thousands. Cal Fire's burning them out now. And Monica's doing amazing data, recording all this ladder fuel impact to really show whether shaded fuel breaks are effective or not. So that's going to be her graduate research, and she should really talk about it on her own, but it's just great to be an acting leg of that project. And I'm also working to execute some CFIP and EQIP funds through some forest management plans for a private property up in Healdsburg. So I'm hoping to do that one. It's kind of different than Saddle because it didn't burn over. So here we are mimicking the role of a low severity fire, dropping all that ladder fuel, getting it all burned out in piles so that we can run fire through it and run broadcast burning through it, similar to what we're hoping to do on Saddle. And
I'm sorry, what was the property on that one, Jason?
Oh, it's a big private parcel. It's still in development, but it's right in Marshall's district by Healdsburg. So I'll be looking forward to working with like Marshall or Fire Forward if it comes through.
There's a
It's a heck of a-
VTP in that area as well, so maybe you can tap into that.
Oh yeah, it's an awesome property. It's some beautiful oak woodland. So it's nice to see the homeowner really want to do what's right for the land.
That's great.
And then we've been working with Land Trust a little bit, which is cool. Sonoma Land Trust, we're going to do some selective bay thinning on a sensitive site at Glen Oaks Ranch there, and really do like a targeted bay forest thinning project where we save those heritage bays, but then actually do a number on those ladder fuels there. So kind of an ecological touch on that one. And then maybe the last fuel related one that I'm really excited about is a project that was funded in Glen Ellen in a sensitive watershed called Wind Creek. And they have a great private landowner there who started talking with the community, much like you, Lynn, getting the community engaged, getting the access. And yeah, so this Wind Creek watershed, I've been going up there meeting with the local fire department and the landowners and the Sonoma Ecology Center. And there is just like a wall of 10-foot broom coming in at the top of the watershed. And it just is infested down the whole thing straight into Sonoma Creek, where it can continue to infest the entire watershed. So it's an awesome project that it's funded now, and we can go in and start addressing some of these source populations. So I'm hoping to work hand in hand with the Ecology Center on that one when the stuff is out flowering in April. But I'm also working on a big one in Point Reyes, but it's out of our district. But it would be an awesome substantial invasive plant fuel reduction project out there. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff happening, marrying these things, restoration and fuel reduction. It seems to be getting a little more traction. So we're getting there. Thanks, you guys.
Awesome. Thanks for that update, Jason. All super interesting. Arthur, you're next.
Thanks, Adriana, and good to see everybody. I can't see myself on the screen like I used to be able to, but it seems like these days that's not happening when I get on Zoom. So I'm assuming you can see me.
We can see you.
You can see me. Okay. Well,
Yeah,
I
you're
can't see
looking
myself.
good. You got the mountains in the backdrop. You're looking
Yeah.
solid.
Okay. How's my hair look? No, just kidding. Well, nice to
It looks fluffy and very nice.
Still there though. That's good. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, good to be here. I'm Arthur Dawson. I'm a historical ecologist with Baseline Consulting. And one little aside is I just got back from a month in Europe, and the surprising thing to bring back to the forest group, well, one is it was wilder than I expected. There's a lot more open space than I might have expected. And also along some of the major highways, there was actually logging going on a small scale that you could see from the roads and from trains and stuff, which, it just occurred to me, like around here, I think you would have a huge protest if you tried to do anything like that. So just, it's a different approach. They've been doing it for hundreds and hundreds of years as opposed to, shorter time here, but it's just an interesting contrast. So my work, I finished up a big CAL FIRE research project a couple months ago, looking into vegetation trends and cycles in fire-prone landscapes in Napa, Sonoma, and Lake County, and had some really interesting results from that, which I brought back to the forest group, and I'm looking to continue some of that research with Pepperwood was the sponsoring organization. And so I'm looking to continue that research, and Pepperwood and I are looking for some more funding to maybe begin identifying places that are especially prone to large fires. That was one of the results, was there seemed to be certain conditions conducive to these really massive mega fires that are related to the amount of tree cover that seems to happen on a cycle of 30, 40, 50 years. So it seems like it's possible to identify areas that are at risk for really big fires. So it's a little different take on it than just looking at, ladder fuels. I'm sure ladder fuels are part of it. Anyway, I'm hoping to get some funding to maybe identify areas particularly at risk for large fires. And And also, I'm gonna have to leave in a little bit. I'm going out to a place called Shelterwood, which used to be Camp Cazadero, which I've never been out there before, but they contacted me a little while ago and I saw some of the work I'd done with CAL FIRE. So they're interested in having me do some, work on their property, and they're looking at, it's a really interesting organization. I've just started poking around at their website, but they're doing indigenous stewardship, what do they call Black and indigenous sovereignty, all kinds of various folks. So bringing in other perspectives on tending the land and looking at cultural change that they hope will extend beyond their 900 acres. So I'm really interested to go out there today and just talk to them and see what they're up to and see if I can contribute in some way to their projects. And if anybody knows anything about that particular site, it's up Kings Ridge Road, 900 acres. I think they have some of the Kashaya involved as well. So anyway, it's an really interesting group. Yeah, Dee, you're muted.
Did that used to be the music camp?
Is that it? Yeah, it's Camp
think so.
Cazadero. Was that the music camp?
Mhm.
Yeah, wow. Fantastic.
And I realized I wrote about it a while ago, long ago. It used to be called Truth Home, and it was kind of a, some people would call it a cult site. So, so interesting history there.
I think Nico is from Shelterwood, and he had
Yeah,
come to a
that's
couple
who I'm
of
meeting
events,
today.
right?
Yeah,
Oh, good.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. Yes, tell us all about it next month.
Yeah, definitely. So that's all I've got at the moment.
Great, thanks, Arthur. Christy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Christy Teproxy, and I'm the new CEO of Circuit Rider. I've been with the organization for about 2 months, and thankfully, this is actually my second tenure with Circuit Rider. I worked with them as the COO a few years back, so have some familiarity with its operations and its long history. We've been around since 1976, and I was recommended by both Che Kazul, who was our most recent CEO, and he's now the executive director of the Sonoma RCD, and also Una Heacock with Conservation Works to come and introduce myself and join this meeting in the hopes that there will be a place for partnership and collaboration since the work that Circuit Rider is doing is in support of the goals of this working group. Ron mentioned that Conservation Works is now co-located with us on our Windsor property. So we're really excited about that. I think since May, we've had Conservation Works co-located with us, which will help in terms of some partnerships with them. So we're very excited about that. Part of what Circuit Rider does, we have a whole host of programs, but part of what we do is we have ecological crews that are part of a workforce development program. And it's paid training for young people ages 16 to 30 who are interested in natural resources and land management. So we do a lot of fire fuels management and do that in an ecologically conscious manner. So hoping that, again, that we can be of service and in partnership with some of the organizations here. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm also looking forward to the presentation that Ryan's going to do later today. It's nice to meet you all.
Awesome. Nice to meet you. And maybe for some of you who've already met you before, see you again. So yeah, Che has been, we've loved working with Che and Circuit Riders, and super excited to have you come in when you can to share some of your work with us and find ways that we can partner.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, next is Ryan.
Hey everyone, Ryan Klausch, California State Parks. I'm an environmental scientist in the Wildfire and Forest Resilience Program. I will not give any further update because I'm doing a presentation, so I will give plenty of more information during that presentation.
Makes total sense. Thanks, Ryan. Okay, and Tom.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Tom Jackson, COO at Circuit Rider, and Christy has already given an introduction of who we are, so I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah, well, thank you, Tom, for being here. It's nice to meet you, and thanks for all the work that Circuit Rider is doing.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. And Kim.
All right, good morning, folks. It's great to see everybody again. I feel like I'm still recovering from the hangover of the conference. So we've been working on a lot of fun activities as the dust settles for the conference. Specifically, we are launching the National Fish and Wildlife funded training and capacity building project with Gold Ridge RCD. That contract with Gold Ridge is being approved by the Board of Supervisors on next Tuesday. And then we're ready to launch a series of workshops that are really going to be targeting communities and forest landowners in the most vulnerable areas as far as wildfire goes, as well as along the entire Russian River watershed, trying to think about ways in which we could improve our forest management, improve our watershed protection, thinking about how to train landowners as well as crew members so that the ecological factors are all folded into those types of things. And so while wildfire resilience is a part of that, carbon sequestration, ecosystem services of these lands are equally important. And as I've shared with Adriana, I think our perspective really is to try to get as many landowners into a room addressing local forest management issues and be in the room with people who are experts in those fields. And so I'm anxious to bring in folks like Jason Mills, Jason Wells. CAL FIRE is all on board. The RCD brings a tremendous amount of resources. If we can try to drag Arthur and Ryan into the picture, I think that would be really good. But really is trying to set up these venues where people get a chance to have face time with professionals, not only in the context of these workshops, which would be like on a, maybe a 3-hour session or more, but also get the opportunity to go out in the field with an RCD forester to be able to talk about these things on the ground on their property. So it's not just a one and done, but this continued collaboration and communication with these folks, all with the intent of trying to improve our ability to manage our forested resources, protect our watersheds, protect our communities from wildfires. So I'm really excited about this new effort. It's going to be a 2-year investment. And so you guys are really the targeted individuals to kind of promote this type of work and trying to get as many people engaged as possible about this. So that's all I have to report out today.
Fantastic. I'm also super excited about the community offerings that are going to come out of that, and it's like Kim said, it's I think we're going to be tapping a lot of you guys for help as guest speakers, guest presenters, help us craft these workshops and get more education out to the community so that we feel like the skills are out there on the ground where they need to be, and we can kind of uplift the community to do more of the work that we're all talking about doing. So that's awesome. Thanks, Kim. Okay, I think people moved around a little bit. Dee, it looks like you're next.
Okay, thank you. Gosh, so much is going on. It's just jazzy. I'm going to talk about taking action for living systems first. And I just wanted to say that right now we are working on selecting a few folks to join us to talk about TAL's goals. Taking action for living systems is TAL's. To support, to talk about our goals, but also to pull apart our goals. Are our goals the right ones? So we're bringing people in that may differ from us or may augment and add to what we're trying to do. And at some point, I will make a presentation to the group about that because there's such wonderful new folks. Maybe I should do that at some point. Also, TALS is joining with the Swedish Chamber of Commerce in San Francisco and Silicon Valley in designing their November conference. and I will put this conference on in the chat if I can get to it, to invite people. It's going to be in November, and they are bringing innovative forest solutions to this conference in San Francisco. So I know Tamara has been there. I know there's other people that have attended in the past, and I look forward to having some of you there, because the more we can get there, the more focus on Sonoma County there will be in the future for collaboration between these two countries. Or it's a California, actually, not a US. So it's California and Sweden, and they're including the French Chamber of Commerce as well. And the main focus for this reason to connect with them is to encourage private capital investments on private lands. That's really what's needed to augment the public monies that are coming our way in a great way, but it's never going to be enough. We have to get some partners in this funding. The other thing is that I have a question. My personal question is how to work with tan oak and other real oaks that are returning, that now have so many, well, redwoods too, really, but I only have the tan oak and the oaks because we haven't had a fire. How do we work with the little guys that are now about 3 or 4 foot tall and 3 or 4 foot in diameter with all these stems? How are they going to become trees? Or should we even think that that's what they should be? What should they be? What type of growth we should encourage? And I love at some point to have a conversation, because I know this is happening all over the place, especially probably in wildfire areas. I have a problem because the tan oak died and some of the other oaks. So anyway, that's just something for the future. And if there's something else, I think that is it. I guess one comment. There are 3 legs of the wildfire issues. There's the defense, there's the house hardening, there's the defensible space, and then there's the forests beyond those 2. There's 3 legs to the stool. And when Kim was mentioning the term community forests, well, that's exactly the 3 legs need to be considered. And so I'm really, really excited about what the open space district is, and that kind of new term of community forestry, if you will, or our term for it now, because it involves all of the pieces, all of the 3 legs of what we need to do to return our forests to some, for the best, the healthy forest deal. Okay, that's what I have to say. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Dee. I can't believe we're going to be interfacing with Sweden and France.
Yeah.
That is so cool. Please send us more information when you have it about that conference. And I feel like maybe, I don't know, but maybe Ryan could address a little bit of your question about oak resprouts and what kind of management techniques are there when he does his presentation later, or now, if you want to.
I want to say one last thing. I didn't mention that there's going to be a fourth forest salon on our deck in September to make direct connections with the Swedes and the French in this way, so that not everyone can go to the conference, but they could come to our forest salon. So that's it.
Oh, how cool.
So I can give a little of what I know about a lot of those stump sprouters. So I know in working with Sonoma Land Trust, one of their tactics is they pick the stems for the tree. So they will remove all the excess stems and leave 1 or 2 behind, and allow those to become the main stems. And really what that does is helps deal with the fuel issue, because if those little bushy stump sprouts catch on fire, it's not a great thing to happen, especially near a house or along control line. But for us, like in state parks, where we are the forest beyond, we could spend years going in burn areas and pruning all those multi-stems up, or we can just wait 10, 15 years and those stems will naturally self-select, and a lot of those stems will die on their own, and the ones that dominate will live. So that's that part of, we can duplicate the work for the trees, or we can let it happen. It all depends on your priorities and where those multi-stems are located. So I've thought about that too a lot for state parks.
Thanks, Ryan. One thing I'll just throw in there to add to that is that, what we see is that it's really just the Doug firs that don't come back after fire, and pretty much every single hardwood does. And what we think is after we see the scorched landscape, it needs to be revegetated. But meanwhile, there's like extensive root systems that go like 10, 20, 30 feet deep that lead to like 3 to 5 feet of growth per year on what comes back. And so hardwoods establish quick post-fire. So anyhow, it's just kind of interesting. I think we don't talk about it enough, the stump sprouter effect and what to do about it. But
I think we should have a little, discussion about it at one of our meetings.
totally.
Thank you.
Nice. That was really interesting. I'm glad we could talk about that for a minute. Okay, and so let's wrap up. We have a few more people left, and then Ryan, can you tell me how much time you would need for your presentations, just because we're running a bit behind? I have 45 minutes on the agenda for you, but does that?
I can shoot for 30. I can also speed up and slow down as needed. So
Okay.
I have about 30 minutes worth of material, understanding that sometimes that turns into 45 depending on questions and all that.
Okay, great. Well, then that sounds fine. We'll make sure to start at least by 11:15. Okay, great. Okay, next is Brooke.
Good morning, everyone. Brooke Edwards, Sonoma County Regional Parks. Couple quick updates. We're gonna kick off our monorail redwoods shaded fuel break implementation in September. So hopefully mid-September, we'll be starting to work on that. And that's gonna connect Tyrone Road. The shaded fuel break will go through the property and go up to the West Ridge. And so that's part of our work to reduce fuels, but then also provide an access route to CAL FIRE so that they can access the West Ridge that's above monorail redwoods. And along with that project, we're partnering with Brock Dolman of Occidental Arts and Ecology Center. And the young sapling material, the Doug fir, the green gauze, as Brock says, we're going to be collecting that material and actually using it to do gully stuffing or gully packing to start to address some of the erosion gullies that we have on the monorail redwoods property. And so that's going to be a pilot project for us, working with Brock, and we're also going to be inviting the different agencies out there that kind of permit those types of projects. So California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Regional Water Quality Control Board will be out there as well. And so, this is our effort to do fuels reduction, but then also partner it with erosion control, gully packing, that type of work. And so this will be our pilot project, and hopefully, it's successful, and then we can kind of key in with a number of the different workshops that I know that you folks are all setting up. And so hopefully we can, do a walk and talk out there maybe next year when we have some of these projects implemented. So that's a quick update from us. Thanks.
Awesome, thank you.
Hey,
That's
Brooke,
super great.
did you have a particular date that you're going to be doing that field visit?
Well, we're going to start the project in September, but the work probably wouldn't be done, until I'm thinking the end of November. So, based on when the rains come through, we could probably do something in the winter and just hike up that road.
Awesome.
So starting in the winter and then on, we could probably do some workshops and site visits.
Great, that sounds great. So yeah, let's try to coordinate on that, because that would be a perfect in the field workshop that I'd love to promote.
Way to do something responsible with all that material, Brooke. Kudos to you.
Yeah, and Brock has done this a lot on their property. And so he has really good examples. We went out there last year and did a site visit. And then we even did a site visit after it rained. And so we could actually see it working, flooding, recharging the floodplain. So it can work, and we're excited to start to implement this on our parks.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. And is there any way that we can observe the kickoff of the shaded field break in September?
I would rather have people come out as we're kind of halfway through the project, so I have something to show you. So yeah, possibly, you know, thinking by the end of October, we'll probably have some gully stuffing and packing occurring. And yeah, I could invite folks from this crew out there, and if you even want to, you could roll up your sleeves and help us out.
Oh, great. All right. I think that'd be fun. All right. And next is Sloan. Sloan Goldfader. Yeah.
Oh yeah, hi, and I'm Sloan. Nice to meet you all. I just graduated from UC in May, and I'm taking over for Joseph from the NRCS. Starting this week, I was the forestry intern for the NRCS starting last summer, and now I'm being converted to full-time forest position, and once again I'll be taking over for Joe. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to working with you all.
Okay. Your connection is a little choppy, but I think I heard most of that. And Joe's here, so maybe we'll let Joe explain the transition that's happening at NRCS. Thanks, Sloan.
Hey, yeah, guys. Hi. Yeah, so Sloan said that she's going to take over for me. I have actually accepted a position up with Washington State Department of Natural Resources, silviculture position up there. So I'm going to be leaving NRCS next Friday. Actually, will be my last day with the agency. But yeah, like Sloan said, was our 2022 forestry intern for Sonoma County. She was slated to go to Napa County, actually. And then once I moved out, they decided to move her over here to Sonoma County. But she's a great resource for you guys, building knowledge very quickly, really enthusiastic, great attitude. So I'm sure you guys will have a great relationship moving forward. Other updates for NRCS. I'm not sure if I gave this last time, but as far as EQIP, we just finished our obligations for EQIP and RCPP. We did contracted 15 EQIP contracts for about 1.15 million total. And then we did 5 RCPP contracts totaling 770,000. And that wasn't even all of them that we submitted. But good news is that 1.1 million that we obligated in EQIP Inflation Reduction Act money is going to almost triple next year. So a lot of money coming in next year for EQIP. On top of that, of those EQIP IRAs, we implemented a couple cool practices. One, which is the upland wildlife habitat management, which allows folks to select a target guild or species and manage through specific practices that we can help guide them through, or just monitor activity and the effects of their other forest management practices of how that affects that target species, whether it's through video monitoring or point counts, photo point counts, or building brush piles specifically targeted for migratory birds or bird boxes, etc. And then monitoring their use and influx or utilization by those species. So cool new practice that we have on the books. Helped a little bit with some folks getting funded. on top of that, one of those contracts were actually the first Sonoma County EQIP funded prescribed burning contract. So that's pretty cool too. One of the very, very few in the state of California with NRCS to actually get funded to do prescribed burning. Now that we're getting some good burn bosses to get us that plan before we can submit it. So, and then a couple other contracts that we've had, obviously working towards prescribed burning and trying to fit that in there, kind of indirectly, or just preparing for prescribed burn down the road. But yeah, as for me, it's been a pleasure working with all of you and meeting all of you guys. So best of luck with your ventures. And yeah, it's been an honor being a part of this working group. I'm really, really glad to have seen it all come together. So yeah, good job, you guys. Keep up the good work.
Hey, Joe, where is the prescribed burn done?
It'll be in the Mark West watershed.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's going to be about 70 acres. It was part of the Nuns fire, I believe. No, it was Tubbs. Tubbs overlapped with the Kincaid. Yeah, so it's right there in that little area.
Very nice.
So,
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, Joe, congrats. Beautiful forest to tend to up there in Washington. I think you're gonna love it.
Yeah.
Can I ask you to rehash those numbers again? Those were some really impressive numbers. So
Yeah.
how many million or how many projects got funded for what? And then I'm wondering, is that statewide or Sonoma, or what are we looking at?
Yeah, no, that's just Sonoma County. Statewide, I actually don't have those numbers, but they are impressive. Something like 6.6 million for just forestry in the state. Yeah, and then 1.15 million just for EQIP IRA, which is the Inflation Reduction Act money. And then another 770,000 for the Regional Conservation Partnership Program that was just rehashed this past year.
And how many projects does that?
Total 20 projects total were selected this year between EQIP and RCPP. 15 in EQIP and 5 in RCPP.
Okay, and we're going to see that grow in the coming years. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I think RCPP is probably going to be pretty similar next year, but yeah. EQIP IRAs. Yeah, the next 5 years is, I think it's building for the first 3 years, and then the last 2, it'll kind of taper down a little bit, but next year is not even going to be the biggest one.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah.
Pleasure to meet you, man. Good luck.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, any other questions for Joe while we still have him?
Yeah, how's our state conservationist doing in Sacramento or Davis?
Yeah. Are you talking about Carlos Suarez, or are you talking about Chris Zimney? Okay. Yeah. No,
yeah,
Carlos,
just up there. Yeah.
Yeah. No, Carlos has been great. We really appreciate him. He's been doing a pretty good job. So yeah, he's a good leader, and yeah, it's been working out well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, I appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Joe. And good luck in Washington. Like Jason said, I think you're gonna love it too. But we'll miss you down here. So visit anytime. All right, that is everyone. So now I think unless I missed anyone. Did I? I don't think so. So now I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about conference follow-up. And I missed the last meeting where we kind of went through sort of like what, if the impressions were of the conference. So sorry, I missed that, but that's not so much. But, in this conversation, I want us to think about like, how do we move forward now? Like we had an audience of 120 landowners at that event. Like, how are we going to continue to support them after the conference? And I want your thoughts. And one thought I had was just to invite them to participate in the different opportunities that each of us members has going on through our own organizations. Whether that be an event or a program, an opportunity, a service that you can offer. I kind of wanted to, I was thinking about gathering from each of you that, written collateral about those things that we can send on to them. And then also I was thinking like, maybe we could do some gap analysis to see like, okay, what aren't we offering that we kind of feel like they need? What are we not offering individually that we think that we need? Is there some way that the forest working group can kind of bridge that gap a little bit? So that was what I was thinking. And I know that there's a whole lot more kind of outreach offerings that are coming soon with, like Kim said, we have now this NIFWIF funding that's going to be funding workshops and trainings and things like that. So that's on the horizon as well. But yeah, I just thought maybe I would survey you all for the opportunities that exist in each of your organizations that we can share out, and then sort of take a look at what we have and see if there's any big glaring gaps. So does that sound okay as an exercise to do real quick? Okay, cool. I'll start off with the RCDs. So like I said in the introduction, we've got incentive dollars for forest improvement practices that we can advertise to landowners through NBFIP, the North Bay Forest Improvement Program, or RCPP, which we have a partnership agreement with NRCS for. I can also say that and we're also going to be doing more fire smart grazing. So that's some kind of financial support to landowners who want to do grazing for fire management. And then I'm working with Fire Safe Sonoma on defensible space support in West County. So West County communities have some financial and technical support doing their defensible space. We can advertise that. I think Permit Sonoma, who's not here today, I think they also have some home hardening defensible space dollars that I can tap Carol Leon to get more info about, unless any of you guys know about that. I'm not super up to speed on what they have available through their BRIC grant, but I know they've got a bunch of FEMA money for that kind of thing. What else? What you want to just raise your hand if there are other, what else is out there that we can advertise to people? We got the VMP through the county. I'll put that on my list. I was thinking circuit riders, we can maybe put together a little thing just kind of explaining the services available. I mean, circuit rider, can individual landowners hire circuit riders or? Yeah, okay, great.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually have some material that I could share with you or with the group that talks about what our crews do.
Awesome, that'd be great. Yes, please. What else? Oh, Jill.
Let's see, just in terms of sort of leapfrogging off the conference, and how we might fold people into the forest group. I think I brought this up previously, but the way we've done that in the past was with brown bags, and I think brainstorming, maybe a series of brown bags that, and it would be nice if they could be hybrid and have, some in-person space and some way to listen in on Zoom and just figure out, maybe 3 or 4 that were on relevant topics and focus on doing that over the next few months. And I also, but this is a little bit off the subject, but I was wondering what's up with we'd had a request for a house meeting. I think it was in Felta Creek, and I just wondered what was up with that.
Yeah, that's a really good one too. I think advertising our house meetings as a service is a good thing to do. And basically the house meeting is just like, if you as a landowner have forest questions that relate to your property, and maybe your neighbors have the same kind of questions or additional ones, we can invite members of the forest working group to come to a meeting that the landowners host. And we can have a couple of foresters and technical assistants there to answer questions and talk, walk the land and talk with those neighbors about their issues. I think it's a really cool thing to do. And I really like the idea actually of us going to them instead of always having people come to us in our events. So yeah, and then Jill, that one, we got that request and I sent it on to Tori at UCC, and she said that she would handle it. So I haven't checked back in with her to see what happened with that, but I can do that. And then also I really like just what we've done in the past is we've done brown bags and kind of presentations. And I definitely think we should schedule some of those and invite people to them. Awesome. Ryan?
This is extremely specific, but if there's anyone who are neighbors or close to state parks that are initiating projects, we are happy to add value to that and prioritize those areas, across property boundaries so that it expands beyond just their envelope. I know it's a very small group of people, but it's something we want to prioritize. When people are putting the work forward, we want to show up too, because we have the funding to do that. Same with grant funding opportunities. And I should say I am speaking for the Sonoma-Mendocino Coast District. So this is west of 101. I can't really speak for the Bay Area District over in Annandale, but just wanted to throw that out there as a note.
Great. Have you ever reached out to your neighbors directly and asked them if they want to partner with you guys on things?
If we are on the property boundary where we're working, we definitely reach out and check in. We have one project right now where someone already did work, and then they sent us an email saying, "Hey, can you do your work too?" And so we said, "Hey, that's a fair ask. We can also help." So, but we have not sent out information to all the neighbors as of right now. We just also have a lot on our plate as well. So we could spend all of our attention on just the neighbors right now if we wanted to, and probably be full. So we're trying to balance.
Well, that's a hugely generous offer, Ryan. I think that's really commendable, especially I think regional parks and Brooke are very familiar with this kind of expectation of neighboring landowners trying to urge each other on to doing work. And so I think it's the whole idea of the fires don't recognize these property boundaries, for crying out loud. So how do we try to figure out that balance of the great work that are happening on public lands, and how to continue that effort? And I think that's the general MO of what the veg management grant's trying to accomplish, of supporting that type of activity. Where's the value added? If you guys are creating a nice fuel break along one property and a ridge line, and then hit a private property boundary, how do we continue the work down the line? So I would really love to work with you guys in trying to think about those strategic ways to use funding that you have, as well as what the PG&E settlement grant can help.
Yeah, I think the biggest part for us is seeing that they put the time and effort into working on their own property first, because we have been asked from neighbors to work on state parks first, without them doing any defensible space around their home. So that's when we've told them, you work first on yours, and we'll come up with our money too.
Awesome. That's great. Thanks.
B. Oh, muted.
How about getting grants that cross private public boundaries, so that one grant can work in both, on both sides of your lines and both sides of the private landowner? Does that happen? Can we encourage that? Because that is going to then really encourage other private landowners to do that throughout our region.
No, for state parks, we haven't done that as of yet. But people have reached out in the planning process, and I think we're always on board for adding value to that. If anything, if we're not doing work on our property, but we can at least show that we're doing work on our property elsewhere, we can also use that as matching funds. So because that also adds value.
We should encourage CAL FIRE to assist in encouraging this type of partnership. Thank you.
Definitely. And I think they have.
That's a really good point, Dee. And I think the Coastal Conservancy has been doing a commendable job on trying to provide public agencies funding where there's no gift of public service of resources. But if they see like a neighboring property, maybe Brooke can speak to this, but the Coastal Conservancy has funded projects that are on public lands and continuing on to neighboring properties. So I don't know specific examples about that, but I think that certain groups, public groups have been receiving that type of funding.
I think that we need to encourage the state to redefine gift. It is not a gift to a private landowner. It is a gift to the public good. And
Absolutely.
We need to erase that whole idea. Thank you very much.
All right.
One
awesome.
example,
Oh,
one
go ahead.
example that we have, I'll just add in really quick, is on Shiloh. We have a large broom infestation in the, I guess that's the southeastern corner. And, we're not able to receive funding from the PG&E grant settlement, but other organizations can develop projects and apply for funding to then work on our property. And so CCNB did that, and they were able to receive some grant funding to work on regional parks property. But then CAL FIRE also got involved and looked at the broom infestation, and they reached out to the adjacent private property landowners where the broom continues onto their property as well. So in Shiloh, we are starting to work on something like that, where we're trying to collaborate with other organizations to bring in funding, and then also reach out to some private landowners. I'm sure that will happen as well for our Monorio Redwoods property, because there's a whole Bohemian Highway corridor, collaborative, where they're trying to address fuel along that whole corridor from Occidental to Monorio.
A lot of those members, Brooke, were at the conference, those adjoining homeowners associations and everything, and they have their own efforts going on in their own leaders, so that should be pretty possible to connect those projects. And I just wanted to throw in the 2 cents that that's why I love this group, right? And just thank everybody, the public agencies, for being here, Kim and Brooke and Joseph and Sloan and Ryan, because we are connecting the dots, right? Because here we have the technical experts, the community representatives, thank you, Lynn and everyone else. And then so we can have these conversations and actually put the best use to the best dollar. And so this is exactly the venue to have these conversations. And then I forget why I originally raised my hand.
Oh yeah, no, that cheers, Jason. That's awesome. Yeah, the original question was just like, do you are there opportunities that conference attendees can plug into from your organization?
Thank you, Adriana. Yes, back to where we started. I did just want to say, I thought one thing that worked from my end was doing those forest classroom lessons. I did a lot of handouts and I ran out. So people were eager for the handout. And then and I printed a ton of them. And then the Forestville Fire Safe Council reached out to me to get that invasive plant management calendar in their newsletter. And they put together the most beautiful newsletter, that Forestville Fire Safe Council, with a bunch of great links. And it was just really impressive. So it's nice to get the word out there for the community to put this these lessons learned into effect,
Oh, neat.
I'd like to just say that Lynn Garrick is the primo example. Oh, did she? Oh, there she is. Of a private community joining this group and really benefiting them and benefiting us. So we should encourage these other fire safe councils, or whatever type of, combination of private landowners that we can bring in, and then we're going to cross fertilize, Okay.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's another kind of question for us is can we invite landowners from the conference to attend our meetings and like, do we need to maybe this is a question for Lynn, like, is there some way that we could make the format of the meeting even more like supportive to private landowners, since we do a lot of talk that's kind of more, I guess, agency focused almost?
Well, for me, the conference was right at my level. And the fact that, as I said last time, the fact that the breakout groups were divided by professionals, beginners and intermediate levels made it very easy for me to be there and be with a group that where I felt comfortable speaking up. So I think absolutely it's been extremely beneficial to me. And I think you have other people as well, Judy and Dan and some other people that have participated here that are private landowners. The fire safe councils tend to be, they're all over the county. So they're fire safe councils like in incorporated areas and in unincorporated areas. But I think that's the reason why I'm trying to create something new for the Ridgetop Fire Safe Councils, because we have common concerns and we're all living in the WUI. So let me think more about that and get back to you. But I definitely think that I've benefited a great deal from this. I've met people and gotten resources and information that has been extremely helpful. So I'll think more about how that might pertain to others.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I just, that would be wonderful if you had some ideas to bring back to us so that we can make this forum even more kind of useful to the private landowners, because I think, yeah, you are a minority of the group and we want to make it a little more equal. Awesome. Okay.
Can I make
Ron.
Yeah, I'm mostly an observer, especially of you, all you in this box in front of me. And but when you look at fire, you can go from the bottom up or from the top down. If you're doing management of species, or you got the star thistle on the top of the ridge, and you go down, you got the Scotch broom, and then you get down and you get something else, Arundo, you either go. So anyway, top down. Also, it's top down economic situation, density of housing, people on the edge, and we're, Sonoma County is just so on the edge. It's like, we're spread out everywhere. And one thing about the conference, the people that really had an interest, or several people, I didn't talk to everybody, but I just listened a lot. There are people that do really want to do the right thing, and they want to have the right knowledge. They don't want to just follow some slogan. They want to know what it is, how it is. And I think that's the most valuable thing that came out of that conference. I think people found their way if you were on a field trip, you were on that field trip, but within each, our like a conference, we had 3 or 4 symposiums at once. And the people I think some people chose just because they want an overview. And that was number one. I think that was good to sort of like basics. But I saw people going here and here. And if you really want to do something and you can afford it and you got a large enough property, you're going to. And I think a lot of people found what they wanted. And they went home and I don't know how. We're the surveys we talked about before we even started was like, what do you ask them? There was so much debate over this questionnaire. So, but really, we're trying to serve our community for their benefit as well as ours. And I just think that was a great thing to look forward to. And I think that the people that got something out of it are going to spread the word that they did a good job. I think clarity of message, so much was presented that it's like the state fair. Are you there for pigs, hogs, chickens, architectural design, flowers? There's so much there that we kind of had a fair about fire, But I just feel like it was a big opening for people to learn stuff, and maybe from the data we get feedback is who was really seriously interested in this and who wants to know more and who isn't. But I think advertise, make sure point out agencies that can help you and the services, we're all services. I think we all some way volunteer to do something. And so that's what I got out of it.
Nice. Thanks, Ron. Dee, did you want to say something? And then let's make this just a 1 minute more, and then we'll move on to Ryan's presentation. You're muted.
Great that you were listening, that you're an observer, and then allow us to understand what you've learned from that. So 3 cheers. And I also suggest that we consider doing a post survey and find out, well, did they do anything? Do you want to share what you've done? Do you have further questions? I mean, just a very simple thing that they could respond to if they wanted to. Thank you. That's it.
I like that idea. All right. Let's transition now over to Ryan. And Ryan, why don't you go ahead if you're ready and start sharing your screen.
Sure thing. And I'm going to turn off my video so that we can focus on the presentation and hopefully the connection stays good.
While we're waiting, I wanted to say, Lynn, I got an answer about the North Bay Forest Improvement Program. They start taking applications September 1st, and then we'll take them all the way through the end of the month.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, is it showing the presentation?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's not presenter view, it's the full thing.
Yeah, it looks right.
Okay, perfect. So thank you everyone for letting me present today. I did get a little introduction of myself, but I've been here with state parks in the Sonoma-Mendocino Coast District for about a year and a half now. My background when I went to school for my bachelor's was in wildlife ecology, and really that's what I'm trying to bring to state parks. Part of the mission statement for state parks is to preserve our natural habitats and improve them the best we can. And so I really want to bring that here to state parks. And part of Dee's like 3 legs of the stool, a lot of what we have is the forest beyond, but we also have that the boundaries with private landowners. We have our own facilities that need defensible space and structural hardening. But a lot of this work is focused on the larger forests, especially on the coast, that have not really had the funding to be dealt with or managed in any positive way. A lot of it has just been left to let the habitats do their thing for a long time. And just to give a little perspective about where I'm coming from besides wildlife ecology, my first prescribed burn was in 2015 with the U.S. Navy in Florida. We were burning longleaf pine for defensible space, really, on military bases, but also to maintain gopher tortoise habitat. So like my very first burn was in fact something that was being done for habitat improvement. And so I've come a long way from Florida being here now in California, but it's really cool to now be in a position where I have that influence and I'm able to do prescribed fire as a habitat restoration tool.
And I just want to check in real quick. We're still looking at your first slide. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Just checking.
All right. Did it flip?
Yeah. Sorry, I spoke too soon.
No, you're all
It's
good. I was just about to change it. So for more context, the Sonoma-Mendocino Coast District goes all the way up to Mendocino County, just south of Laytonville. And we're really split into two sectors. So the Sonoma County parks are within the Russian River sector, and then the Mendocino sector is up north. And we're pretty lucky down in Russian River because we have around 6 parks that are fairly close together and easy to get to. Whereas I believe there's 17 parks in the Mendocino sector way up there, up along the coast. And so it's a fairly spread out, hard to get to places. So we're pretty lucky down here, but I get to work in the whole district. I'm just focusing more so on the Sonoma County parks. And so we have about 45,000 acres. 35,000 of that is forest of some type, with just a little over 1,000 acres of old growth spread throughout the parks. And then about 8,000 acres of grassland, scrub, chaparral, and some other habitat types. And a absolutely astounding 62 miles of coastline, which is amazing for all our crews working on the coast, but it's a lot to manage as well, given the amount of public presence and projects that we also need to do along the coastline. And so I'm working for the Wildfire and Forest Resilience Program. And so a lot of our work is focused on ecological restoration through both prescribed fire, manual treatment, mechanical treatment. And really, as an ecological restoration tool, I prefer using fire as the natural means of creating disturbance, creating mosaics. And that's through piles, through broadcast burning, working with local tribes for cultural burning opportunities as it's appropriate. And then otherwise, we can't really burn where it's not feasible, using manual treatments or mechanical treatments to reduce fuels, and do a lot of work in terms of succession management, because we have a lot of places that we've been really great, really successful at excluding fire, at suppressing fire, especially on the coast, where there are very small windows where intense fire can happen. And our fire agencies are very effective, especially on the coast, outside of those windows. So there's a lot of places within our parks that just haven't burned in a long time. And so that part of the ecosystem has been missing in some places for over 100 years. So a lot of what my goals are is trying to reintroduce fire in those places, and in places where they've been impacted by legacy timber harvest, where most of the old growth has been removed. Our goal is to kind of expedite the pathway for those second growth and third growth forests to turn into old growth. Definitely not in my lifetime, but I'm hoping in the future generations that these places can be set forward on that path. As a forester will tell you that most of their work, they will not get to see the fruits of that labor. It's a very long-term action and goal. And so I've kind of broken up our parks by habitat. And one of the biggest ones we have is, of course, North Coast coniferous forest. And so that's our redwoods, that's our mixed evergreen hardwoods, Douglas fir mixed in there. And really what we're just trying to do is restore fire return intervals and increase the amount of heterogeneity, meaning that our habitats are not one uniform, the same type of forest, the same type of habitat, but fire allows that disturbance to break that up, create openings, create meadows, create that spatial heterogeneity that it really is what our native species have adapted to over a very long period of time. And so we're trying to bring that back. And of course, reducing fuel loading, which we all know that's one of our goals. And some of the biggest ones for me too is also creating habitat through fire, is like creating those cavities and hollows and unique branching that, windstorms can create that in trees, flooding can create that in trees. But without fire, a lot of our second growth redwoods aren't going to have the same type of goose pens or hollows that we're used to seeing in old growth trees. They really need some level of fire. And in this image here, you can see that is an old growth redwood that has a goose pen that is now being enlarged. And so the goal is to have that happen without also causing mortality. And that's a very delicate balance. that we have, because we also don't want to lose our old growth trees, but we also recognize that fire has a place in these trees and creates that habitat. Often when a tree does that and creates a chimney, up underneath the goose pen is a great place for species such as bats to live in and create a roost. So there's a lot of those things that we want to also keep and not lose, but also create new ones so that there are more cavities for the future. And lastly, I'll touch on that is in terms of our old growth forests, we're focusing a lot of our work on protecting old growth forests and old growth redwoods from unplanned ignitions from a lightning strike or a fire coming off of Highway 1, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of opportunities to protect those places and pre-treat them before a wildfire treats them for us in an uncontrolled manner. And a lot of the same goals that we're trying to reach are the same for our oak woodlands and oak savannas. One thing that they're experiencing is a lack of fire, and a lot of that comes in the form of very young Douglas fir encroaching on old growth oaks and shading them out completely. And we've actually done some projects where an oak had, maybe a couple branches that had leaves still on it, and we removed the Doug fir around it. And within a couple months, it actually had a third of its canopy came back from actually getting it back in the sun. So trying to do that, trying to restore oak woodland is a huge priority for us as well. And not trying to say that Douglas fir is a bad species or something that we don't want. It's just that with the lack of fire, it really has taken over a lot of places that it wouldn't naturally be with a normal fire regime. And I have a lot of the same objectives listed here as well. So similar to the North Coast coniferous forests. And Adriana, speak up if anyone raises their hand or has a question. I can't really see Zoom, so feel free to have me pause if you need something.
Okay, yeah, and I would just say if anyone does have a question, they can unmute and ask it. Since we may not have time for Q&A at the end, it might make sense to just do a little bit of that during the presentation.
Yeah, I actually had a quick question. Ryan, do you have any resources that you'd recommend for encroachment or combating encroachment, specifically of oak woodlands? I mean, we obviously can get into chaparral and grasslands as well, but.
Yeah, in terms of resources, are you thinking about interpretive materials to give to landowners?
There's that, but also how do you approach Doug fir encroachment? How do you decide how much to remove, et cetera? I guess your protocols for oak woodland encroachment.
Yeah, for us, I'm not really aware of any standard protocols for it. For us, where we're at is we're pretty okay with removing trees that are under 11-inch DBH. And if we end up having old growth Douglas fir that's within the stand of oak woodlands, we've pretty much accepted that they're now there. We don't plan on removing any old growth Douglas fir, especially because they have a lot of great structure for especially bird nesting, but other species, Sonoma tree vole, for example. But for us, we're mostly okay removing 11-inch and under, and then depending on the stand, we'll go up a little bit higher. But really, it's looking for if there was oaks in that stand before, and going from there.
Totally. Yeah, that makes sense. Then I have just one other niche question. Sorry to take so much time, but say you have a Doug fir that's under the 11 inches, but growing into the canopy of an oak. Do you have a specific protocol for how you cut that or how you take that out without damaging the oak or getting hung up?
Yeah, so I guess it depends on each tree, but we've used classic arborist tools to try to get it out safely as much as possible. Pole saws, other tools. I think it gets to a point where you might just need a tree climber in some instances.
Yep.
We've also wondered similarly, what happens if you remove all of the Doug fir all at once, and is that a stress factor on that oak, going from 100% canopy to 0? is that going to be too much in terms of both sun and wind? So we're still trying to figure that out. But yeah,
no,
a lot of it
that's
is
fun.
it's the classic term, adaptive management. We're figuring it out.
Yeah, no, that's great. This is definitely, I'm writing materials for a handbook for vegetation management. You've probably heard to some degree, but this is one of the topics I'm writing on right now. And I'm just trying to figure out how best to distill this knowledge that seems pretty ubiquitous across most professionals. But yeah, without citing sources, sometimes it's difficult.
Yeah, and another thing to add without taking too much more time is something that's difficult is now you have all this biomass that was once standing is now on the ground. And what do you do with all that? And we've been piling it, in some places lop and scattering it. But moving that material somewhere else is expensive and a whole much more time as well. So that's another problem for a lot of places. If it's really remote, you can't really get that material out, and definitely is not valuable in terms of timber.
Yeah, definitely. Habitat features creation and retention is certainly something I'm trying to push as well. Habitat piles on top of burning and other things. So yeah, that's great. I'll definitely be in touch here.
Cool. No, feel free to reach out. I can put my email in the chat and we can keep talking.
Perfect. Thanks.
I will keep going then. So probably one of the most difficult issues that we're trying to handle right now is our coastal close cone pines, specifically bishop pine. For those of you that don't know, bishop pine is extremely adapted to fire. And for the most part, fire is its primary technique in terms of reproduction. So bishop pines right around 80 to 100 years old will start to die naturally, both from disease impacts and old age, without the entrance of fire. And you can see that very clearly at Salt Point State Park and many other places on the coast. Point Reyes has some of that as well. And so we right now have a lot of old growth bishop pine that is senescing. It's a fire hazard. And the problem as well is that when you burn in bishop pine, it tends to crown fire, completely burn to the ground. It's a stand replacing fire. And it naturally does that. And that also makes it very difficult to do a prescribed fire because you're starting to have entire trees engulfed, and you have trees that are sending embers across lines and into other stands. Anyone who's fought a wildfire in bishop pine can attest to how difficult it is, especially in windy weather. Essentially, bishop pine stands will entirely torch, send an ember to the next stand, 200 feet away, and that will torch, and then that will keep moving and moving and moving until everything's burned pretty much completely. I know in Salt Point there was a fire, I think in 1993, and there you can see the impacts of that fire. It was able to be suppressed at one point, but burns very hot, very fast. And so in these stands, really what I'm focusing on is creating defensible space around campgrounds, around our structures the best we can. But in terms of prescribed fire, until we are more experienced and ready to deal with it, and CAL FIRE is on board, we don't really have an opportunity to burn a lot of our bishop pine. And we have paleoecology studies that show that in the long-term past, with the influence of tribes, most of our first coastal terrace didn't really have a lot of bishop pine on it. It was burned more regularly, there was more grasslands, and where we now have really thick bishop pine forest, we actually had bishop pine woodlands that were burned, and some trees didn't burn completely, but they were more spread out, and it was less present on that first terrace, mostly from the influence of tribal cultural burning. And so right now we're dealing with not only bishop pines that are dying, but bishop pines that are in locations that they wouldn't have been historically. And I would like to add to that, because pygmy forests, which we do have up at Salt Point and further up in Mendocino, they're also adapted to stand replacing fire. And so we're trying to figure out how to handle that in a way that doesn't create a wildfire of our own. and grow into something that we can't even handle. Then we have chaparral, and really for state parks, we don't have a whole ton of chaparral. A good portion of it that we did have, or still have, I should say, is in Austin Creek State Recreation Area, but most of that burned in the Walbridge fire, so we're kind of good there. The fire did its thing. Chaparral is also something that is kind of a low frequency, high intensity burn, and so it hasn't burned in a long time, so it burned up in the Walbridge fire. But in places that we do have chaparral that did turn to old growth, we've also had instances where Douglas fir have shaded it out, as in this picture, and we have dead manzanita from actually being success by Douglas fir. So we have those situations as well. And we also want to make sure that we maintain our native grasslands and don't have chaparral succeeding over a lot of our grasslands. So we're kind of having it on all aspects, but again, focusing on that mosaic that we're trying to create with different habitat types. For us, we don't have a lot of chaparral around structures, which is really where it starts to be difficult. For anyone who lives more eastern in Sonoma County, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and that chaparral is a difficult habitat type to live nearby in terms of fire.
Yeah, I'm curious, Ryan, what is your approach to managing chaparral? Just because there's not a lot of literature out there, and there's not a lot of people who stand very strongly on how to approach it.
So my approach, if we do have any chaparral next to structures, is to essentially work on shaded fuel breaks and creating that buffer so that there's enough room between the resources we care about and the chaparral. And then otherwise, let chaparral do its thing. And just given the amount of fire that we've had, I feel like our chaparral will get fire during a wildfire when it needs to happen. And so it's a fairly hands-off mentality for chaparral, at least for state parks, because chaparral has its own habitat values, and we also value that. We're happy to let it just do its thing, except when it's close to resource values. And so we're just lucky here in Mendocino, Sonoma, where we don't have a lot of it next to our structures or homes.
Totally. Yeah. Thank you.
One of the big ones for us is also our coastal prairies, and a lot of which has converted into coastal scrub, also Douglas fir. But all of our really high quality grasslands that we have, we're really looking to restore and maintain the fire return interval, and again, keep that habitat heterogeneity and maybe even expand some of our prairies if we can, reducing non-native cover the best we can. There's a lot of non-native grasses where we can do as much as we can, but it's kind of there. But there are some places where we still do have really high quality bunch grasses and places that are really important in terms of habitat quality. And then we also have several butterfly species that are federally endangered, and they rely on a violet that is an early successional species. So it requires disturbance of some type. And historically, that would have been large megafauna, ground sloths, mammoths, a lot of things that no longer exist. So the grazing pressure is no longer here. We don't have elk anymore. And clearly black-tailed deer are not quite enough to do that as well. So besides that, fire is a very excellent tool at creating disturbance and allowing for the violet to come back. And also we've used grazing in certain circumstances, primarily because it just works out because we have a couple of long-term leases that have maintained. But in general, across the state, grazing has not been a high priority for state parks, but we are trying to use it if it means habitat restoration. And as an example of lack of disturbance on the coast, I have this picture here of the mouth of the Russian River. This is sometime in the 1940s. And Goat Rock is right there on the right. And the first terrace there is mostly grass. I'm sure there's some scrub in there. And off to your left in the background, you can see some of the redwood groves up on top of Red Hill. I think I have my little laser pointer. You can see right there. It's the Red Hill Redwood Grove on top there. And then here's a Google Earth photo. it's very different, especially here in this marine terrace. A whole lot more Douglas fir, a lot more scrub, and even up in here. And I'll go back and forth just to give a little difference there. It's 80 years of very little disturbance on the coast. Of course, also in the 40s, the military used this first terrace here as a practice bombing range. So that probably changed a couple things there on the coast as well. But besides that, there are some private landowners up on this part of the first coastal terrace here at Sonoma Coast State Park. But for the most part, the rest of it has been primarily undisturbed except for hiking trails. And in some of the places that we have coastal dunes and bluff, we are working to use prescribed fire to reduce non-native cover, specifically ice plant and European beach grass. There are some places where, the beach grass is reducing erosion, and we recognize that also is super important for certain private property. But in places like at Manchester Beach up north, we're looking at opportunities to remove European beach grass and replace it with native species. And we've been very successful up in Manchester of just hand pulling a lot of it, and non-native species come back very readily in those places. But we've also seen that in Point Reyes, and I think up in Humboldt County, they've also used this on European beach grass using prescribed fire to remove the cover and bring it back for native dune species. Because European beach grass really changes the structure of those dunes and really covers up on all those native species. And lastly, it's really difficult to work with, but a lot of our wetland and riparian habitats also need fire to a degree. This picture here I have is from the Thomas Fire I worked on as a wildfire. And even when everything else burned around them, we still have riparian areas that survive during really intense fire effects. And that's something to remind us when we're prescribed burning, is that those riparian areas are super important, and but also a lot of those plants are filled with water. And so even when we're prescribed burning, we need to remember that fire does good things in there by removing dead material, so that during a wildfire, a lot of those places aren't burned too hot. And especially during prescribed fire, those places are places where the fire will naturally die out and really not cause too much impact as opposed to a wildfire during a red weather or a red flag weather warning. And a big part of that is when we introduce disturbance into riparian areas, which of course they're adapted to disturbance through flooding, but fire allows it to do the same thing, where you remove some of those stems in riparian areas, and it improves the water availability for fish and wildlife. It does allow for some level of sediment and gravel to move around and create structure in those streams. And then also in some wetlands and some more stable riparian areas, if you remove some of that growing material, you also increase the higher water table because you have less plants sucking up all that water. And so it's a good way to manage those habitat types as well. And throughout the country, a lot of both farmers and tribes historically used fire to really restore those wetland areas and cause a lot of regeneration. A lot of those plant species have rhizomes that allow them to easily just, when a disturbance happens, they can start back over again, just like most of our plant species in California.
Hey, Ryan, quick question about Himalayan blackberry that seems to hang out in wetland areas.
Yes.
Is it susceptible to fire?
So yes, it depends on the timing.
Yeah.
And we have successfully burned blackberry. It comes back, and it's something we're trying to figure out as well. That's another adaptive management issue we're dealing with.
Sure.
But it can be a fire hazard too, because if you do get it burning, it burns hot and fast.
Yeah, really hot, I would imagine. Yeah.
And so again, close to homes, trying to remove it best as possible would be highly recommended. But we are dealing with that in some places where we would naturally have riparian vegetation. It's now Himalayan blackberry instead of the native blackberry, or
Right.
elderberry, or some of the more native species that we have.
You know, one quick note on that, you guys, is post fire when all that blackberry burns over, great opportunity to jump on it. Up at
Yep.
Sugarloaf, they had like a 12-foot, 3-acre stand that got, you know, the Nun's fire took it all the way out. And it would have been so easy to get the resprouts. And now that 12-foot stand is right back again.
Yeah, wildfires are an opportunity. And it's the same for prescribed fire. You have to think about after the burn, you know, not everything's going to be all fine and dandy. You really have to look out for those invasives that are going to come back in, or new ones, or it's really an opportunity for them because they're also pushed back. It's a good time to get in there and get some treatments done during that recovery period. And I know I'm getting close to my 30 minutes that I now promised, but this should go fast. I have some successes of the projects that we've been working on. And in the past 2 years, we've been really focusing a lot on field reduction work along some of our major roads and trails, specifically Fort Ross Road, Seaview Road, Upper Willow Creek Road, Armstrong Woods Road after the Wall Bridge. And really our strategy for that is starting there at those roads as like an anchor for future treatment. And we start with piling and burning those areas. And then we're hoping to broadcast burn in those areas, and then continuing that fire down the ridge, down to places so that if our fire or prescribed fire down below the ridge, you know, finds a way uphill, it's going to be hitting areas that were previously burned or already black. And so it helps increase our safety, not only for prescribed fire, but for wildfire events as well, hoping that if fire hits that, it's going to die down and allow our fire agencies to do some good work before it turns into a larger wildfire. And this picture that I'm showing here is over at Fort Ross Road. We had a lot of sudden oak death with our tan oak. Like I'd say 95% of our tan oak there are dead or dying. And so it's turned into a very tall, slashy understory, ripe for a great wildfire to happen. So a lot of piles. It looks honestly like a thinning project for redwood, except we didn't cut a single redwood. We just cut the dead tan oak. And now those redwoods will have plenty of light and resources to grow into larger redwoods. It's pretty exciting, actually. Burned them. Piles burnt. Charcoal. And this is a place that the next season, all the redwood needles fell on the ground, and you can hardly even really tell that there was piles there. So pretty fun to see it happen all in 1 year and pretty quick. And even in this picture, you can see a couple of trees that could probably be removed as well. But, you know, this is all adaptive management, and we're starting slow. And another fun thing we found in some of our work along roads and trails, here up at Salt Point, there was a lot of brush, a lot of huckleberry, a lot of native shrubs, but they were along a road. And 3 months later, after doing about 20 feet off the road, we had coast lilies come up all up and down the road. And coast lilies, if you don't know, it's ranked like I think a 1B1 by the Native Plant Society. So it's ranked as a fairly rare plant. And so it's really cool to see that our work is not only good for reducing fuels, but also it's allowing opportunities for disturbance and for these species that require that sunlight and open spaces to come up and thrive. You know, they're just waiting for the right opportunity. And some of the other challenges we're dealing with really focuses on a lot of our forest health. And, our coastal pines are senescing, and you can see in this picture here, just the sheer amount of bishop pines that are dead with all the gray that's in there, and not a lot that we can do about it. We're dealing with drought, dealing with climate change impacts, and wildfire impacted areas, which Eastern Sonoma has dealt with far more than the coast, but we're also having some of that in Wallbridge, in the Wallbridge scar. And just to add in terms of bishop pine, I just want to kind of show what we're dealing with if you haven't seen it, but this is our beloved old growth status of bishop pine. This is, between 50 and 80 years old, they spread out and the diversity in the understory really improves. You have a lot of ferns, you have a lot of great understory species. And then this is the places where we built a lot of campgrounds. But unfortunately, because those trees die, and they are dying, we're really waiting for either a wildfire to happen or removing those trees. And when a fire does happen, like at Point Reyes, this is what it looks like after. And you have a full sea of bishop pines reseeding, and this is natural. And then it turns into around 14 years, 15 years after, it turns into this, which if anyone is living next to that, I would not be happy to live next to this in terms of fire hazard. But this lasts for between 15 to 50 years. And that's a native status of bishop pine. And over the 20, 30 years, they self-select. The small ones that are not dominating the stand die off. And then it really turns back into this beautiful stand. But it's really a game of waiting at that point. And in terms of fire safety, living in this is really not a great situation. And you don't really have the time to wait 25 years and a chance for a wildfire to happen. And just to show kind of how fast this thing can happen in 10 years, this is a picture at Point Reyes. And this is what's happened over 10 years. You can see the amount of death that occurs. And of course, diseases also have a level of impact here as well. But old age is also a factor. And lastly, just because I'm very proud and
Ryan,
excited.
actually, before you go on, can we talk a little bit more about that? I was just thinking, since the bishop pine is it requires high intensity fire, it's hard for us to let it just do its natural thing, right? So is there a way we can facilitate it? Like, I was thinking, could you were talking about all the dead trees that are standing that State Parks is just kind of waiting for a fire to come through. But I know the ember cast would be really intense and could endanger communities. Is there something we can do? Like, could you remove the the dead trees and then do prescribed fire through that area so that it still gets the fire it needs, but doesn't have to burn these dead trees?
Yeah, and so I should be clear, we are talking about working in defensible space areas or places that are close to neighbors and working in those areas. And we're even considering just converting bishop pine to other habitat types just to create that safety barrier in lieu of being able to actually regenerate bishop pine in certain places. And I think really what you need to do in those situations is really focus on treating the risk and going from there. You can do a prescribed fire with those trees in the ground, but usually by that time the cones are no longer viable, or the seeds are no longer viable. But there are ways to manually have seeds, and you can actually put cones in an oven at a certain temperature and cause them to release from the cones, and you can plant those seeds. There are ways you can deal with that. You can also, because the main issue for bishop pine is all the needles in the ground prevent new bishop pines from regenerating. And so if you can rake out certain areas. So you could remove like all the needles, you can get rid of all that understory and try to like recreate that. But that's a very, very intensive project. And those are things we're thinking about doing. But right now, because we have so much work to accomplish, we're really focusing on where we're doing the most good, and that's defensible space and trying to protect things that we have right now. But my hope is in the future, we're able to work in bishop pine more effectively.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I want to just again say we're not waiting for a fire to happen in those places that risks are at value. That's definitely not what I want to have the message of state parks be. But the reality is also that there's just some places we're not going to get to, and that's just kind of the reality we face in a lot of places on the coast.
I remember after the Vision Fire in Point Reyes, I went in there with the C's, and the bishop pines came in so thick you couldn't even see the fire roads or the trails.
Yep.
So we ended up having to thin all those trails and all those roads back, but it ends up being just so much woody vegetation. I don't know if you could mechanically thin the whole thing. It's like it's a little kind of like knob cone pine, but a higher fire return interval, right, over a lot more acreage. So really interesting.
Yeah, it's really difficult given that it has a life cycle of about 100 years, and we now have people's homes and our own structures weaved into the middle of it. It's definitely not an easy field type to work in. It really, what I see bishop pine as is, think about how hot chaparral burns, but now make that a tree. So you're now dealing with a very tall chaparral. And so that can be very, very scary to deal with. But fortunately, at least on the coast, the amount of fire that happens there is less likely to happen during certain windows, as opposed to out in the interior.
My question is, what are you most proud of? I don't want to miss that.
Right now, here, I'll just pass it over. So we just hired, how many people is this? This is now 7, but we've hired over 9 people with this program since November. Because this is the first time in a long time that state parks, especially our district, has received enough funding to hire a natural resources crew. And these are all people who in the past couple years have been really tied in with Fire Forward, with the local prescribed burn associations. And they're just really excited, and they're super motivated to do good work. And, coastal views, working in redwoods, you can't really beat that. And so I'm just really proud of all of them, and proud that we're able to get them together. And it's been really great to see it form in just this past couple months, honestly. It's really amazing because there's a lot of work to do out there. If, as anyone knows, walking through the parks, there's plenty of work to do.
Fantastic presentation. Woohoo!
Thank you. Any other questions?
Ryan, I have a quick question related to both this presentation and something that you shared earlier. This is Christy, a circuit rider. We're actually working with the Coast Ridge Forest Council on a project along Fort Ross Road in a couple weeks here, doing fire fuels reduction along that road. And it's a big project. I think they're focusing on a 9-mile stretch, and we're just doing a piece of it here coming up. And I'm wondering if that might be an opportunity related to what you spoke about earlier, in terms of we're working mostly on private lands, have the landowner access agreements to be able to be there and do this work. And it would probably be adjacent to some of the state property. So maybe that's something I can talk to you about offline, but just wondering if that's one of those ways in which to have that collective impact.
Cool. No, yeah, I think that work is being extended off of the work that we're doing. So from Seaview Road down to Highway 1 is state property, and we're working on finishing that whole piece there on Little Fort Ross Road, I think is what people refer to it as. And then, yeah, it connects to the greater Fort Ross area. So yeah, the whole Coast Ridge area is getting a lot of love right now. It's great to see.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Ryan, a really impressive presentation. I just wanted to thank you personally for it. I loved how you covered all the different ecosystems and range of work you're doing. One of my favorite things was how you showed that rare lily, that Lilium maritimum along the road there. It just spoke to sound vegetation management, right? Because if you're doing effective clearing, then it kind of works like a fire, where you see natural native plant diversity coming back after the forest thinning practices. But if you don't, then it's the invasive species coming back and displacing all of those successionary plants that you see post-fire too. So it's pretty amazing. I just think fascinating work, awesome presentation. No questions, really.
Thanks, Jason. And yeah, it's heartwarming to see that the work we're doing has great impacts like that. It really helps sell it, because we think we know what we're doing is right. But it helps really to see it in action and see the fruits of our labor by doing that. And it really shows that a lot of our native species are also adapted to disturbance. We still have to be careful in how we do it, and got to maintain the soil. You can't just plow off everything and expect things to come back native. But for example, up on Upper Willow Creek Road, we had a bunch of hazelnut that was just really tall and leggy. And of course, it's beautiful to see in person, but at the same time, it can be a fuel risk. And just 3 months after, they're already resprouting. They're like 2 feet tall already, which is like, oh, we're gonna have to retreat it. But it's just cool to see that it's like, yeah, these species are they're ready for it. It's a natural thing to happen. You just unfortunately have to recreate fire through a couple of chainsaws, which is a lot different, but in some places it's what we got.
Yeah, Ryan, regarding the hand crew versus prescribed fire, I think that's a really challenging issue with landowners because the cost of those types of treatments are expensive. Can you give us any kind of, you don't have to do it now, maybe offline, but kind of the economic cost of how much it's running you guys per acre? And you're very fortunate you have a state bank to be able to lean on, but you still have to be cognizant of how much things cost. And ultimately, we want to get to that point where we can do hand crews to a point where, yes, now we're ready to throw some fire at it, and that's probably one of the most economic treatments. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's extraordinarily expensive. That's the hard part is a lot of people, if they want to do the work and they have a lot of land, you're going to have to try to get a grant or work with NRCS. And it's not really something that I've been able to wrap my head around. I'm just very fortunate to have the funding. Very fortunate. But there's ways to be creative about it. And you don't always need like a full 20-person crew from a contractor to do the work. Some of the work can be done even by landowners. You might not be able to cut down large trees or even small trees, but some of this work can be done by hand a little bit over time. I mean, it's what I do in my own yard. I've slowly worked away at it. You can't do it overnight. But no, it's extremely expensive, and I don't have an answer for how to fix it. I know the working group that's what a lot of its focus is on, is like, how do we get this thing that costs so much money out to the public, to people who don't have the funding to do that.
Right.
And the hope too is that this initial treatment's super expensive, but prescribed fire should be cheaper.
Yep. And I'm wondering, like, are there opportunities? This is kind of, I've tossed this out to Jason as well. It's like you have these great professional crews that are really doing a bang up job. I really think there's a great opportunity for folks like Circuit Rider and CCMB and the JC to be able to shadow your crews in some informal system, to be able to bring their level of knowledge and awareness of how things can be operated, so that we raise the bar as far as the quality of the crews that can then address and be available to landowners without having to contract the Park Service crews.
Yeah, recently we had CCMB working out at Austin Creek for post-fire work, and I had our state parks crew working with them hand in hand, and just talking with the crew lead, just they gained a lot from working with our crew, and they shared a lot of knowledge. And so hopefully with our opportunities to also have those crews come on, it's helpful. We've been having the CCCs come out to Fort Ross, so we're trying to share that knowledge best we can. In terms of like some of the other contractors who are just like extremely fast and really effective, I think that just comes down to being really hard workers. And you don't really, you don't learn how to do that. I think that just comes with being really experienced, being put in that position. But yeah, the bleeding over of that knowledge is super important. Sharing it, experience it, is huge.
Right.
Especially for those young crews.
Yeah, exactly. That's really key right there. It's like, for these crews, and we've all worked with CCMBs and Circuit Rider crews, and to have them motivated to see good crews in action. So it's one thing to be able to present, here's what we want, we want to do this particular prescription, but for them to shadow a team that's really getting it done and really knowledgeable about how to be efficient with your time, even, there's a right way and a wrong way to use the chainsaw. You could be fighting it all day, or you could let the machine do the work. So that type of dialogue and conversation in the field is, I think, a great opportunity for us to try to kind of motivate and figure that solution out. So I'm gonna be tapping you for that.
Yeah, much. Thank you for talking workforce, and circuit rider, thanks for joining the meeting. I haven't been a guy that worked my way up from the bottom. I mean, $7 an hour for, basically there's a lot of young, passionate people out there wanting to take care of their lands where they grew up. And so I think it's so important to give them the shot, right? Get them in there. And then the next step, where do they go from there? Right now they're trained. Where's the professional path? So just excited about this conversation and look forward to continuing it.
Yeah, I appreciate this conversation so much. Obviously, a major focus of Circuit Riders Ecological Cruise program is to do that workforce development of young people who are passionate about this work and who can move on into other career paths. I was actually thinking that as Ryan was speaking in his presentation, I was like, the younger folks that we work with, I could see them going on and doing that type of work because they're starting to do that work with us and are very passionate about it and want to move on to working with the state parks, regional parks, municipalities. So, either formally or informally, we'd love to be part of that. We partner a lot with CCMB. They're one of our partners. So I actually was just in a meeting with Angel yesterday, their CEO. So even if we could do those kinds of observations or working alongside the crews with them as well, that would be amazing.
I would just like to add, I think 3 to 4 of those people, maybe half, have come from Shome Farm, from the SRJC program. One from the Northern Sonoma Fuels crew, and they all showed up fire trained, which is unheard of for state parks to have a fire crew show up already fire trained, not having to go through basic fire. And so just saying that it's working, the workforce development and capacity is definitely working, because it was easy for me.
That's
it would have been a
awesome.
lot of work, but all these people came already experienced. Like, I think all of them had been on prescribed fires already.
I love it too. We
that's
hired
huge.
from Shone Farm too, and Kim helped give that program the boost, right? So it didn't come around in the second round, but that first round seems to have gone a long way, and Brianna's really running with it. So, kudos to that program.
Yeah, that's definitely one of our partners as well. We had our crew going through training for something a little bit different. It was an arborist utility lines training, but they were at Shone Farm the last few weeks, some of our crew, alongside some of the people from CCMB. And we're working on that partnership, Circuit Rider and the JC. Some of our crews already fire trained and have participated with prepping for prescribed burns and things like that. So we're just very interested in growing those training opportunities for our young people.
That's fantastic. That's great.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for your presentation and for the good conversation, everyone. I appreciate it. I think that we've got some good fodder for our workshops and talks in the future. So this is great. I'll spend a little time between now and the next meeting, kind of maybe brainstorming some of those offerings and see if we can get a couple events on the calendar in the fall. I think that'd be really great to work with you guys on designing maybe a small handful of workshops or outings or something. Kim and I will work on that and get back to you for your input and collaboration. And do we have any suggestions for, just while I have you, for a presentation for next month? Does anyone want to give a presentation or want to hear anything in particular? Let me know if you think of it. Okay, thanks everyone.
All right, thanks Ryan, it was a great presentation.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for letting me blurb at you all.
It's a pleasure. See you folks.
See you guys.
Bye.